Picture a map of the world, redrawn every single year. Coastlines quietly erased. Borders redrawn not by armies, but by tides and empty houses. That map already exists. Nobody's shown it to you yet. We tend to think of change as slow, something for history books, not something happening under our own feet. We're wrong. Right now, a family somewhere is packing one suitcase for a country they'll never see again. Right now, the tide is climbing higher than it did the year you were born. And somewhere, buried under 60 meters of gray North Sea water, lies a forest where children once played and fires once burned through the night. A whole world, erased. This is the story of a planet in the middle of a transformation it has never faced before. Two islands, one vanished bridge of land, and one question so simple it sounds almost naive. Why are the coldest countries on Earth so often the richest, and the warmest so often the poorest? Let's begin. Cuba was never meant to be a country people flee in silence. For decades it was a symbol of defiance, a nation that refused to bend to its giant neighbor 90 miles across the water. But symbols don't pay electricity bills. Today, the lights across Havana go out with a predictability residents have learned to plan their lives around. Not for an hour, but for most of the day, most of the week. Refrigerators sit empty, not because they're broken, but because there's nothing left to put in them. Hospitals ration medicine that used to arrive by the container load. And so, quietly, without headlines exploding across the world's front pages, something historic has happened. In just 5 years, roughly 1 in every 10 Cubans has left. Not emigrated in the old sense, fled. By raft, by plane, by a dangerous overland route through half a continent. Entire neighborhoods have gone quiet. Schools that once overflowed with children now echo instead of buzz. Grandparents stay behind with photographs of grandchildren, growing up in cities they will likely never visit. Cuba's collapse isn't one dramatic event. No earthquake, no war on its own soil. It's decades of isolation, a currency that lost its meaning, a government unable to keep the one promise every nation makes its citizens, that tomorrow will be livable. And that's what makes it unsettling. Because if a country can empty out this fast without a single bomb falling, the line between stability and collapse is thinner than any of us want to believe. Now travel 8,000 miles across the planet, to a nation so small you could walk across its widest island in 20 minutes. Tuvalu. Population, roughly 10,000. Highest point above sea level, about 15 feet. From above, it looks like paradise, built by hand. It is also disappearing. The ocean around Tuvalu has been rising for decades, and unlike Cuba's crisis, there's no political solution waiting on the other side of an election. You cannot negotiate with the tide. King tides now regularly push seawater through people's living rooms. Salt water creeps into the ground, poisoning soil that once grew food for generations. Scientists studying the region have delivered a blunt verdict. Within this century, and possibly much sooner, Tuvalu's islands may become physically uninhabitable, within the lifetime of children in school right now. So Tuvalu did something no nation has ever had to do before. It began building a plan to leave itself. Not evacuate a city, preserve an entire sovereign nation, its culture, its citizenship, its legal identity, even if the physical land beneath it slips under the waves. Digital records of the country are being built so that Tuvalu can exist as a nation long after the coastline that gave it its name is gone. A government preparing for the death of its own geography while trying to keep everything else about the nation alive. It may be one of the strangest, most quietly heartbreaking documents in modern history. A country's plan for its own disappearance. Tuvalu's crisis feels unprecedented. But the planet has done this before, swallowing land whole, so completely that for thousands of years, no one even remembered it existed. Beneath the gray waters of the North Sea, between what is now England and mainland Europe, there was once a land archaeologists called Doggerland. At the end of the last ice age, this wasn't seabed, it was some of the richest hunting ground in Europe. Rolling hills, wide rivers, forests where deer and wild boar roamed. People lived here. They built shelters, lit fires, buried their dead, and raised children who never imagined the ground beneath them was temporary. Then the ice sheets that had locked away much of the planet's water began to melt. Sea levels rose across the globe, and Doggerland, being low and flat, didn't stand a chance. It didn't vanish overnight. It shrank decade by decade, generation by generation, as marshes turned to open water, and the coastline crept further inland with every passing summer. Eventually, roughly 7,000 years ago, the sea finished what it started. Britain, once connected by land to the rest of Europe, became an island. An entire world now rests under the waves, occasionally surrendering a fishing net full of ancient bones as the only proof it ever existed. Doggerland isn't ancient history in the way we usually imagine it. It's a preview, written in stone and sediment, of exactly what rising seas are capable of doing to human civilization, given enough time. The only difference now is that we don't have thousands of years to watch it happen. We have decades. Which brings us to the uncomfortable question sitting underneath all of this. Why does wealth on this planet cluster so heavily in colder regions, and poverty so often in warmer ones? For a long time, the explanation offered wasn't scientific. It was prejudiced. Old theories argued that cold climates forced people to plan ahead and work harder, while warm climates supposedly bred laziness because survival came too easily. It's a tidy story. It's also nonsense, and dangerous nonsense at that, often used to justify colonization, treating entire populations as though their circumstances were a character flaw, rather than the result of forces beyond their control. The real explanation is far less comfortable, because it doesn't let history off the hook. For centuries, colder, wealthier nations built their prosperity in large part by extracting resources, minerals, labor, land, crops, from warmer regions across Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Wealth didn't simply appear through hard work alone. In enormous part, it was shipped there, from colonies whose economies were deliberately reshaped to serve someone else's growth instead of their own. When those colonies gained independence, many inherited economies built for extraction, not development. Undoing that structure has taken generations, and in many places, it still isn't finished. There's also a quieter culprit in the numbers themselves. The very way we measure a wealthy nation. Standard metrics reward industrial output and financial systems that colder nations built up first, largely with capital extracted from warmer ones. Meanwhile, forms of value common in many warmer regions, subsistence farming, informal trade, communal resource sharing, often don't register at all, making entire economies look poorer than the lives actually lived within them. So the map of global wealth was never really about temperature. It was about history, about which nations extracted, and which were extracted from. Climate didn't write that story. Power did. A country emptying itself of its own people, a nation drafting plans for its own disappearance. A land bridge that vanished so completely it became myth before it became memory. And a global map of wealth still shaped by decisions made centuries before anyone alive today was born. Different stories, different centuries, different oceans. But underneath all of them is the same quiet truth. The ground we stand on, geographically, economically, politically, is far less permanent than we've ever allowed ourselves to believe. The planet isn't asking our permission before it changes. It never has. The only real question left is whether we adapt to that truth before it's written for us, or after.